Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me today, Fire Chief Holger Durre.
Hi there.
Now, I need to apologize to the audience because I know I can hear the collective sigh because Eric Merrill, Captain Merrill, is not on here today, and I apologize because as we were talking before we started, he's far better looking and more articulate than each of us. Mm-hmm. I probably owe an explanation because, as you can see, a very white beard right now. Mm-hmm. I had spinal surgery in January, as you know. Thank you for stopping by to visit while I convalesced. But I noticed that typically if there's a firefighter on light duty, they tend to grow a beard. And given that I'm technically on light duty, I thought, I'm going to follow the trend that the firefighters use, and I'm going to grow a beard. And I was going to shave it off last night, but I'm kind of attached to it, so I'm going to give it through the weekend.
So I'm hearing it's like a playoff beard for a hockey player. Is that?
It may be something.
I mean, the Super Bowl is coming, so that would give you, something to aim towards.
Well, and now that I've learned that I can grow at least some facial hair, that I may take part in No Shave November next year.
And know that you're not going to look completely silly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because we have a mutual friend in Colorado, Fire Chief Chris Kazian.
Yes, indeed.
And he does No Shave November. And there are some challenges with the appearance. Yeah. As we have pointed out to him on numerous occasions, not good.
Yeah. And the good news is he's one of the 5s of viewers that
he is.
Watch this program, so I'm sure he'll hear this message and
I noticed
the throwdown is on.
When Eric was on, we were having, the ratings went up. Yeah. But the recruit's fantastic. And Chief, I appreciate you coming in today because we like to get together like this. And last week I wrote the Chief's desk for part of the review, and it was dealing with an incident in another state. Mm-hmm. And as you and I talked about, we don't really want to get into the weeds on that. But I felt that looking at my crews at CAFMA anyways, I know that right now they're overburdened. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of mandatory overtime because we have a lot of people out injured. We have a lot of vacant positions. I think we have like 20 positions that are open right now. We have 9 folks in the Recruit Academy that graduate next week. But it's been months and months and months of mandatory overtime, back-to-back shifts, the ambulance challenges that we face, and that's adding to the stress of just everything else that's going on. And then you add family into it. And the message I wanted to share was one of, I know you're tired, I know you're fatigued, but don't let this happen to you. Then I watched your YouTube, because you have a YouTube channel, and you addressed the same issue last week in your message. Mm-hmm. So I thought, why don't we come together? And let's just say it up front, there's no light switch fix to this for either of us. So, but we can at least, 1, acknowledge what's happening, 2, talk about some of the things we're trying to do, both jointly and individually, to relieve some of the stress, and 3, what the future looks like, which doesn't help today, but it's going to help in the next few months. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the mandatory overtime because we're seeing the same pattern on our side. We've had it for as long as you have had it. The other thing I think that's important, at least for the firefighter audience to understand, is this is a nationwide issue. Mandatory overtime and staffing shortages are not unique to Prescott and CAFMA. And while that doesn't excuse anything, I just want people to understand that there's context around that. But where does that lead, right? I think, in our conversations leading up to this podcast, the idea that our folks really need to understand that we do see it, we understand it. I'm not that far away removed from the front seat of an engine and working, 22 out of the 24 hours, and that compassion fatigue creeping in. It is something that we're working on. Last year, we applied for SAFER grant just like you all did. Unfortunately, just like you did, we were not awarded that. Next Tuesday, we present our strategic plan to council at a work session to be adopted in March. And as part of that process, I'm planning on asking for those positions being funded in some way, shape, or form either immediately or, in an installment fashion, even prior to the fiscal year 24 budget, because this is such an urgent issue. The staffing problems at Prescott, as you know, have been there for a long time.
Absolutely.
We are structurally underfunded in several areas that we need to, talk about. Our council is aware of that. The other thing I think our firefighters need to understand, our elected officials are very supportive. We got
Absolutely.
a mid-year 5% CPI increase because of that support. They've put their money where their mouth is. They have not just shown up, they've followed through, and I fully expect that they will have a very productive conversation with us around this because they understand that our firefighters are tired. The mayor put out a piece about a month and a half ago now, and it talked about this very issue, at a strategic level, and that it is time now to act and help our firefighters out on the front line.
Well, and we're following a similar path because, as you said, we put in for the SAFER grant. We were not successful. So we're going to our board as we plan the budget, asking for 7 new firefighter positions this year, along with a couple positions for tech services because Jonah and his crew they have more work and not enough staff. So we need to help them out as well. And we have a 3-year plan at this point to hire. What we're proposing is hire 7 a year until we get to the 3rd year. And in that 3rd year, we would look at putting up an additional engine. Challenge for us is because of the way that we're funded, the only way that I can build a new fire station is through a bond. So we're going to have to start talking about some sort of bond in the next 3 years. But what we could do to start is run a dual engine company here in the heart of Prescott Valley to offset some of the demand. So we're asking for those positions. I mean, the upside for us, as I talked to you yesterday, is that we do have the 9 recruits that are graduating next week. That's really going to help. We have several folks who have been out with back injuries and back surgery, kind of like me, except I'm useless to them. Will be coming back online soon. And that's going to help reduce some of that mandatory overtime, but we still have the called demand. So when I look at reliability ratings, they're going down. We had just got the latest benchmark, and what we showed for last year was at least 2 of the stations were below 70%. That's not where we need to be. So we're going to get folks back online. We need to add more people to our shifts just to overall up the minimum number and look at an ARU to decrease some of the volume, as we've talked about with some strategic approaches to how we dispatch, right? Priority dispatching systems. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in play. The challenge for us, as I've mentioned to you, is how we are funded. So while we need new positions, right, it's easy to say, but just like the city of Prescott, new positions cost money. CAFMA, Central Yavapai Fire District, Chino Valley Fire District only have one source of revenue, and that's property taxes. That means to hire the people that we need to meet demand, we're going to have to increase the property tax in incremental levels over the next several years. That's also why I'm asking the board, as we move forward later into the year, if we could apply for a SAFER grant that could be, if we were successful, we would learn about it sometime in February of 2024, and then we'd have 90 days to fill positions. So we would maybe overlap that fiscal year by a month, but that way we avoid having such a dramatic increase in tax rates the following year, because now we have 3 years to slowly add those salaries in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously from a general fund department, there's 2 things I think that really stick out for me in what you just mentioned. Number one, that is one of the values of the partnership that we have, because we are from totally different funding models, which makes our partnership not just strong but diverse.
Right.
So for instance, when we're talking about some of the projects we'll talk about a little bit later on the podcast, we have different flexibility than you do. I wouldn't say better or worse.
Right.
It's just a different approach, right? The other component of that is our reality on our side is we have not built a fire station since 1995.
Right.
And since then, in the city limits, our call volume has doubled. if we didn't have the partnership that we had, I would contend we'd need 2 more fire stations now just to deliver the same level of service. But that service level is also degrading for the community right now.
Right.
We don't have enough folks. And so we've got to figure out a way to raise the capital, and we've got to figure out a way to find the money in the general fund for more firefighters as well.
Sure.
Yes, we have a deeper pool, but that also means we're in competition for the various policy objectives that the city currently is facing.
Correct.
But I would say that one of the things that creates is adversity that helps us have a conversation to face things that otherwise we might not get into.
Right.
And this might be a good time to talk about the move-up module. How else can we get efficiencies that help our firefighters, that increase our response times, decrease our response times technically, right?
Absolutely.
And decrease our vehicle movements at the same time, which is better for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
And I think we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now and have the opportunity, right, to get that change management process rolling if we didn't have the problem, So.
Right. No, and you're absolutely right. And one of the things I want to point out to our tens of viewers and listeners is that we are truly a system up here. So while you're the chief of Prescott and I'm the chief of CAFMA, and our engines have different stickers on them, the reality is that we operate as one.
Yeah.
Because when we empty Prescott Valley out or Chino Valley out, it's Prescott that's coming in. And when Prescott gets emptied out, it's CAFMA that's coming in to back everybody up. And that's one of the challenges for both parties right now, and leads to the fatigue that we're seeing and the stress in our folks, is because, Prescott Valley just got hit. That means that now Prescott has another run or multiple runs. Well, Prescott's super busy. That means CAFMA crews have more runs. And because of the distance, as you talked about, you haven't built a fire station since the mid-'90s. Ours was built right before I arrived here in 2013, so maybe sometime 10 to 12, Station 58. But the growth just in that short time is the statistics, the data are telling us that we need another station, and we're actually looking down by Fane Road and 69 because Station 54 is getting busier, and every time they go out, 53 moves up, and then if 53 or 50 gets a hit, because 50 moves up a lot as well, then another engine goes, and then pretty soon 75 from your Station 5 is moving up. And it's just this domino effect as we go. And if we continue to operate the way that we are today, we're going to continue to burn our folks out. And I'll tell you, and I think it's the same on your side when you talk to your council. When I spoke to our board and just gave them a preliminary, here's what we're looking at. And the question I received or got back was, do you believe that our current situation with the limited number of personnel and the workload is adding to the stress and the mental and behavioral health challenges that we're seeing within our organization? And my answer was absolutely 100%.
Yeah, I would agree. Same thing on our side. And I would also say that this extends to our 40-hour ranks. Our fire prevention folks, our administrative staff, we're all tapped at this point, and it is time for us to recognize that, because as we had conversations about some other issues, I think talking about it and daylighting it and making sure we acknowledge it helps just a little bit. Even though it might make it seem like it makes it worse for a while, it helps us deal with the issue, and it helps paint the picture, because I think for too long, the fire service in general, but I can definitely speak for my organization, we've said, we'll make do. Don't worry. We've got it. Take that position. We'll be fine. We can't do that anymore.
No, do more with less.
Correct.
So when I first came here, I was initially the fire chief of Chino Valley, and Chino Valley was facing some financial constraints. And a lot of that was a result of Prop 117, which limited our property value. And so as we were looking at what the future may hold for Chino, we discussed the idea that we may have to brown out a station or step the station back from an engine to a brush truck if we only had 2 people. And the pushback from the firefighters initially was, Chief, we've run 2-person engines before, we could do it again. And my retort to that was, does the public count the number of people that come off the engine? And the answer is no.
Correct.
So if the big red engine shows up with 2 people on it, which means the engine is completely ineffective to get anything done, they don't realize that there's a problem. And if we can't show the public, here's the issue that we're facing, we can't do more with less. We're going to have to do less with less. Then we're not going to get their support. And so it's not a game that we're playing by saying, hey, if we have to go down to a 2-person engine, you're going to go in a brush truck. It's a safety issue, and it's a response effectiveness issue.
Yeah. Strangely, it's also associated directly with my perspective on accreditation.
Right.
Because it helps you daylight issues objectively
right.
that need to get dealt with. Right. And it's not, to your point, to play a game.
No.
But it is to show what actually is. The mayor in Prescott aptly says you can't manage to a fantasy.
Right.
And if we continue to put out there information that makes us, quote, look good, but dismisses the problem, we can't deal with it. And it's our job, especially as fire chiefs, right? To articulate the problem in a calm, clear, objective way and work with our elected officials to solve that problem.
Yeah. Well, and we're recording this on Wednesday, and this morning was our Prescott Valley Chamber breakfast, and it was a state of the state for Prescott Valley. And so town of Prescott Valley and the county spoke. And I kind of felt like something was missing, and I'm going to visit with Marnie Ewell, the chamber executive, about this, because the fire department, us, CAFMA, have a direct impact on the town of Prescott Valley. So as the town of Prescott Valley discusses growth, a measured growth, seeking some industry and business here, it's important to understand the fire department's role in that, and that businesses will look at what are the fire protection services available, and what's my ISO rating. And what I can tell the community right now is our ISO rating just took a hit. Yep. It went from a 3 to a 4. Now, residential may not see a lot of concerns with that, but ISO goes directly to your insurance, your property and casualty. Commercial businesses are the ones who see the impact of the ISO rating. There were 3 issues that were pointed out. 1, fire hydrants. Not my area. There's nothing I can do about it. The 2 others are directly related to us. 1, we're not getting enough personnel on the scene. 2, we don't have enough equipment. So we're not getting an effective firefighting force on scene in a time, not even close to the time that the standard sets. Are we effective? To a point, yeah. But as the community continues to grow, can we continue to spread our current level of firefighters out so thin that response times start to go up? Yeah. Reliability ratings continue to decline. And somebody said in the chamber meeting this morning, they said, we have to invest. It wasn't us. I wanted to get up and say, but they said, we have to invest in infrastructure along the way, because if we don't maintain it, then it's going to continue to crumble until the point where it gets even more expensive to fix.
Yes, we have that problem in the city of Prescott as well, and that's something we're currently working on. It's actually in our strategic plan. So our strategic plan calls for 2 new stations in the next 5 years, but we're also calling for an investment into renovating our current fire stations. Yes. Because if you can imagine that our newest stations is built in 1995, the oldest fire station, and you put that together for an average, I've got some facility backlog issues that our facility folks contend with on a daily basis. Yeah. Even just energy efficiency, is an absolute indicator for me that we need to invest into our infrastructure, because that point at the chamber is so well taken, right? You're going to spend money regardless. You might as well spend it in a proactive, strategic way than, bleeding it reactively.
Well, and when I say our data shows that we need more apparatus, we need additional personnel. We're working with you to look at, and as well as priority ambulance, at alternative response means and cleaning some of that up. And those are all good things, and those are things that we should be doing and we're working on, but it doesn't change the fact that our folks collectively, Prescott Fire and CAFMA, are burned out. They're fatigued. We're seeing the mental health and behavioral health issues. Unfortunately, CAFMA has seen it all too much the last several months. And, I think one of the messages that we talked about was that fatigue can lead to complacency. Now, I spoke to one of our captains yesterday, and he said, Chief, I just want to tell you that there is always somebody on the crew that will step up and say, no, here's the right thing to do. We're going to continue doing it. And it's not that somebody says, hey, let's purposely go the wrong way. Yeah. It's more of a, hey, I'm exhausted, and I made a decision that I wouldn't normally make. And unfortunately, we see headlines all over the United States where this is happening, and good people are losing their jobs because of one bad decision. And it's not necessarily a pattern. It's one day. And I talked to you yesterday about a program called Career Survival. And what I wrote last week is Career Survival is not just a training program. It's a reality. And if you take shortcuts because you're tired or you're becoming complacent because you're burned out, that normalization of deviance leads to a predictable surprise. And in some of the instances that we've seen and read about and that we've talked about, it may be a firefighter or an engineer that makes a poor decision, but we saw in certain cases where the company officer lost their job or was suspended without pay for a time. So there's a lot of accountability and responsibility out there. And I want to say, I think that your Prescott firefighters, our CAFMA firefighters, do an excellent job. Yep. I don't believe that they're acting in any manner different than what you and I expect. I also know they're extremely tired.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up. I had a conversation with one of our chief officers just the other day, and he basically said, hey, I made a silly mistake on an email that I sent. I never do that. And, the response is, well, why is that, right? It's not just because he's careless, because he's not at all, quite the opposite. One of our most conscientious employees. It is that exhaustion, that saturation, being completely overburdened. And I agree with you on the supervision piece, right? It is one of those things, and this is, I think, why it's so important to have the conversation. You're right. Our folks are amazing. They follow through on the values that we put forward in our organizational guiding documents. But at the same time, if we come out and say, not only do we see that you're tired, but we have a concern that creates an environment where not only safety issues could crop up, but also these types of issues that we've seen across the country. I think it actually helps our personnel as well engage in that conversation within their companies. And what you just mentioned about, somebody on that crew going, hang on, let's do it the right way. My hope is by us talking about it, the chances of that happening increases even further rather than decreases. And we say, hey, it's no longer just this hidden thing where we unspokenly tell our folks, just continue to put your head down and grind it out. Not at all. It's, yes, we're working on it diligently. Both you and I are engaged constantly at the level that we need to be engaged with to get more help on the way. We get it. We hear you. But at the same time, I think letting them know that this also creates an environment where there is chances where mistakes that are regrettable mistakes, as we've seen across the country, could be made. We need to have that conversation. We owe it to our people to have that conversation.
And I think that's why being here today is so important, to get the message out that we talked about some things that we're doing, whether it's implementing new software or discussing new response models as we get more people and more access to resources over the next few years, getting people back into onto the floor within CAFMA from injury and the new recruits. Very excited about them next week, graduating February 16th, if you'd like to come down.
I would.
It's going to be great to get them out there, but the other side of this, the paramedic side too. And so we have a meeting on Thursday, meeting with Yavapai College and their EMS coordinator, because we've talked with Matt Beal from Priority, and somebody's had some conversations with AMR, and we're asking the college, hey, is there a way you could support a paramedic program specifically for CAFMA, Prescott Fire, Priority Ambulance, AMR Ambulance, if we guaranteed you 25 students? And I'm looking for a way that normally CAFMA will support 2. I'm looking for a way to set up a program where we can put 6 or 8 into that paramedic program this fall. And we're not short paramedics right now. I think you're we're both kind of meeting the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
But based on the call volume, our current minimum standards are no longer enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to increase that, which means increase training and getting more people through. It also means looking at how do we best take care of our paramedics, whether it's stipend or access to additional training, whatever it is. How do we make sure that we're showing them that they're valued in the organization? Their skills are absolutely valued.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I was a medic for 24 years. Some of the best times of my life were at Station 5 in St. Charles City on the ambulance running fire-based. So we run everything, fire calls, motor vehicle crashes, structure fires. And there'd be times we'd come in, sit down our bag, and then we'd come back off the ambulance and pick our bag up the next morning and go home.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but man, those days were a blast,
in
my opinion. But if I went back and got my medic license again to try to backfill, who's going to be knocking on the doors down at the state to try to improve things in the EMS transport world up here?
Right.
Because somebody's got to do it.
Right. And keep in mind that you were licensed in the state of Missouri
True.
to practice medicine. And, well, I'll leave it at that.
Well, and you were licensed in the state of Colorado. Correct?
Yes.
So you have some different medications from Colorado.
That's exactly right. That's very true. Yes, yes. The modalities are a little bit more wide ranging.
Right.
Yeah. Holistic.
I was trying, this is off base, but I was trying to figure out, because we're looking at ways to better fund CAFMA. You're looking at ways to better fund Prescott. Being a district, I have some opportunities cities may not have, like entrepreneurial business opportunities. So I was recommending a bake sale, and that led to, well, there's other medicinal things out there. Could we get a license for that and then get a distributorship for like Frito-Lay? Mm-hmm. So completely off base, completely out of line. So I'm going to say it anyways.
Yeah, so kind of like a COVID vaccine clinic, just different?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, like that, but different. Okay. Different. So when we talk about the mental health side of things, mental and behavioral health, because they're two different things, right? I've been challenged, and we've been challenged as an agency, asking ourselves, what are we missing? Mm-hmm. What else can we do? Because when we look at what we try to do and what we try to offer, and we bring Prescott folks in on some of these things, we have the Partners Academy that we partner with Prescott on, right? Bring significant others in. We bring in training seminars related to marriage and finance, and having conversations in that environment about mental and behavioral health issues and teaching people. We have Start Moving On counseling services that CAFMA has retained. I got to tell you, the best investment we've ever made is working with Start Moving On and Dr. Ritterbusch and her folks. They have been fantastic. Chief Fatima is a facilitator at the Mighty Oaks Foundation, which is a place people can go for a week to seek. It's more of a facilitated session because they're not counselors, but it's widely regarded across the United States. So we take part with that. Then there's the center in Maryland. We've had a lot of folks that have taken advantage of that. And then Friday, you and I were on a webinar called Next Gen, the first virtual offering, 2 hours, and it was on mental and behavioral health. And I got to tell you, I've been racking my brain for what else to do. And Tempe Fire comes on and talks about some of the things that they're doing. And I emailed Chief Glass down there. I'm like, hey, can you tell me more about the book you're using for the significant others of your members? Can you tell me more about the high incident stress tracking that you're doing? So we've started vetting the book at CAFMA. You're going to vet the book, see what it's like. But the high incident stress tracking is something that I'd like to invite you to be part of our conversation next week, because it's in Image Trend, and we both use Image Trend, and your reporting is going from Red NMX to Image Trend, which would make it better. Basically, high incident stress call tracking is within the EPCR system, when you put a certain code in for, like, you ran a drowning, for example, that triggers a report that, hey, this crew ran a high stress incident call. At the end of the month, they get a printout that pairs the high stress incidents with the personnel, so you can see who ran most of those, and you can reach out and check on them. From talking to our HR, Patty, who's very close with your HR, she said, just that simple tracking would really help with the Craig Tiger Act.
Very true. And, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's really hitting us on all fronts, right?
Right.
And you mentioned something a little bit earlier that I think bears repeating. The family and outside the job stress is just as important for us to focus on. And as you've mentioned in different venues, that's where we as chiefs and as departments get a little bit more limited as to what we can do. However, I would contend that us further developing those offerings, in addition to shoring up our call-based stress response that we have a lot more defined, and making sure that our employees have all the resources available that they can for financial wellness, for marriage counseling, making sure that we as supervisors enforce to some extent a good, healthy work-life balance. Here we are, right? We're talking about mandatory overtime and how important it is to staff. And I know right now there's some battalion chiefs sitting at a telestaff screen right now going, "Don't say this, chief." We have to say it. I had a gentleman on our department, speaking of one of those projects, reach out to me on email the other day, and this was changed in the fire service. So I put out a call for project managers for the move up module and the RMS transition. And this gentleman in our department reached out and sent me one of the most thoughtful emails. And he said, "Chief, even though this was a general call to the department, I want to let you know that unfortunately right now I can't do this because it would put me in jeopardy in terms of being stressed to the max." Our firefighters at Prescott, as you know, they all have programs. I mean, if you're a firefighter at Prescott, you're a Swiss Army knife. You have to do everything, right?
Absolutely.
And so the fact that he took up his authority, reached out to me in a very kind and genuine way and said, "I know that I didn't even have to respond to your email, Chief, but I felt it important that I believe in this process, but I also need to make sure that I maintain a healthy life balance." That's change in the fire service right there. That's telling me that our efforts and our leadership around these issues are putting people in a position where they feel comfortable enough to step forward and say, "Chief, I love it, not now, but genuinely here's why." And I got to tell you, this was not about like, "Yeah, whatever, I don't want to help." It was exactly the opposite. It was healthy behavior of somebody taking up their own self-care in a way that's going to keep them safe throughout the rest of their career. They're following the lead that we're saying is important. And I think that's just as important as saying you got to make sure that, you get your training hours in.
Sure.
So,
well, and to your point with the mandatory overtime, we're talking about that. We're acknowledging that. We're acknowledging the fatigue of our people. And we're talking about mental and behavioral health. And we're saying, hey, this fatigue is lending itself to this, but I still need you to work.
Right.
And it's not fair. I get it. It's not fair. But we are here to provide a 24-hour service to our community, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We're already limited on resources. So if we start taking engines out of service and just saying we're shutting the station down for the day, that impacts the community drastically. And at the same time, it impacts the rest of the people because now they're having to pick up the slack for that engine. Yeah. So there's not a good answer right now other than we are getting the recruits out. We're getting some of our injured folks back. I don't count for anything as far as my recovery in spinal surgery. But we're getting those folks out. We both have staffing plans that we're taking to our elected officials. We have the support of our elected officials. On my side, because it's property tax, it's not enough for me to have the support of my elected officials on the board. I need to try to get that community buy-in and see if someone in the community has another idea that might help with the staffing side of things. And that's why I'm reaching out to key members, key leaders in the community, elected officials, city and town managers, so that I can sit down and say, here's where we are, here's our current plan, but here's the cost to that. What are your thoughts on it? And my hope is that, one, we get some good input. Maybe there's some ideas out there we haven't thought of, right? So we get some good input. And two, like most things, if you talk to people up front, even if it's not something they like, at least give them a voice and talk to them about it. And, maybe you need to take a step back, or maybe you need to continue going forward. I don't know yet. I really don't. But we're trying to lay the groundwork, because we can't keep operating like we are right now.
No.
In the city of Prescott, you can't. At CAFMA, we can't. But for our folks, it's going to take a little time to get there. And are you going to go for another SAFER grant next year, do you think?
So, we need to, and I think fiscally it's responsible for us to, but while at the same time asking our council. Now, the message I will get to council is we can't wait.
Sure.
That SAFER grant can help us with other staffing initiatives that we have in the pipeline, especially around some of the issues we already talked about. But yes, we will be augmenting our request with SAFER grant. I think it's just responsible for us to do right now, because the backlog is so severe. Exactly. We have to do what we can if it's available.
Well, and that's the same thing we're doing. And what I can tell folks when I sit down and talk to them today is we applied for a grant for this year and we didn't get it.
Yep.
We're going to put it in again next year if our board approves that, so that we can incrementally increase and absorb those. But I think, like you and I talked about, we can't do a joint grant, right? We can't put the joint grant in. However, we can coordinate the writing of the grants to speak to the regional approach, which is something I think would help us, because, hey, look, you're not giving Prescott a grant for 7, 8, 9, whatever, and you're not just giving CAFMA a grant for 7. You're giving the region a grant for 14.
Yeah.
Because we need 14 more firefighters in the system, whatever that number is between the two of us. And I think that's why it's important that, one, that we've established the relationship that we have. No, we're not trying to merge the agencies.
Right.
Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
But we've established a very good working relationship, I think, in the time that you've been here. And we're really working to partner in a number of areas to create efficiencies in the system, just like you talked about last week with still exploring the opportunities with our warehouse folks, which will reduce some of the stress and workload on some of your folks internally. So a lot of opportunities. I know we're running a little bit long here, so we'll close it out.
To do
but
that. Anything
that in closing you'd like to say or share?
Well, absolutely. So there's a couple of things. I do want to mention the 10th commemoration of the Hot Shots. We were going to talk about that in another podcast later on, I believe.
Yep.
But I just want to let folks know that might be asking questions. We're getting ready. And to make sure that the analogy that I used, have a table large enough for everybody to sit at. Make sure that we honor the families. It is coming up. It's time to start talking about this. I can't believe we're already in February of 2023. It's crazy. But I'm also looking to that with optimism and hope. Because it allows us as an organization to integrate some things that we haven't been able to integrate. And so I think that's going to be great. And the reason why I mentioned it on the podcast is because I know that issue is so intertwined between the two agencies.
Absolutely.
Our tragedy was your tragedy. And even, the other tragedies that we've had since have indicated that. And it will be something that we're able to share with the community.
Yeah.
But also use it as a way for us to move forward. So I just want to put that on people's radar screens to look out for our messaging around that and opportunities for participation.
Great. Well, let us know what we can do to help and support as we do for each other all the time. I'd like to close with thanking all of our CAFMA and Prescott firefighters for the great job that they do in the field. We know you're tired. We know this is frustrating. We know this is difficult, not just on you, but on your families. And we are working with the support of our elected officials and hopefully the support of our communities to add the resources that we need to give you the support that you need and to meet the demand of the growing communities that we both serve, the growing area. because as we said, we operate as one.
Yeah.
So with that, Chief Durre, thank you so much for being here. Jonah, man, it's good to see you again. When you say you can't believe it's February, my year so far has not gone the way I planned.
That's very true.
So I can't believe that I've been out that long. But I'm back.
You're good with that beer, by the way.
I'm back now. My doctor did say go back as tolerated. I clarified with him as the people at work tolerate me or my body can tolerate it. And he said both. So
okay. At least he wasn't silent.
No, he wasn't silent. He knows me well enough.
Good.
So with that, thank you all for watching, the tens of viewers that we have out there. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with others, because who wouldn't want to see us?
That's right.